Please tell us what we can do to decrease our EMR exposure.
What I report here actually is a protocol developed by a pediatrician in the Bay Area named Dr. Toril Gelter. And she has lots of children coming to her practice who have autism or ADD, attention deficit disorder. And her protocol says, turn your Wi-Fi off at night for at least 12 hours. Don't let the child within 8 feet of a cordless phone or any kind of wireless device. And then unplug everything in the bedroom while your child is sleeping. Don't just turn it off. You want to unplug it. And we've had wonderful case studies. There's a 10-year-old boy who was really aggressive, and he screamed every night from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. Parents weren't sleeping. No one was sleeping. He had never spoken, this child. And the family lives on a military base. And the pediatrician thought, there's no way that my protocol will have any effect because the background radiation from the military stuff is going to be so high. So she just didn't think it would be worthwhile. And this family was desperate. All they did was turn their Wi-Fi off for 3 nights. And this boy then spoke a complete sentence. The parents were shocked. They started unplugging more and more stuff. The pediatrician put the child on a therapeutic grade fish oil, and within 3 weeks, he slept through the night. No more screaming. Now, we don't say that this experiment is what caused the change in his behavior. We say the experiment is free and anyone can try it. I think that protocol is great as a starting place for reducing your EMR exposure. You can eventually, as soon as possible, get wired internet access. And that is going to be different in every community. So you want to look up in your community someone who can help you get wired internet access. Obviously, we're going to be shifting to recognizing that mobile access is an incredible luxury. I'm not saying to get rid of the internet. I'm saying we're going to have to start shifting toward less mobility.
What can we do to decrease our overall media consumption footprint?
I've been breaking up this question in terms of households, municipalities, businesses, websites, different categories for what those different groups can do. So if I start with households, which I might also call individuals. So every time you upgrade to new equipment, to a new phone, a new car, anything, you are engaging that global, gigantic super factory. So you want to delay upgrading as long as possible. Ideally, you want to wait at least 4 years before you upgrade to something new. Unfortunately, a lot of times people don't have a choice. So like people will say, I really need this new software, and then they buy the new software, and then it is not compatible with the existing printer that they have, so they have to buy a new printer. And so I'm hearing that that's how things work now, that you need, when you just upgrade to a new kind of software, that cascades into a bunch of other things that you need to buy that are new and engaging the global super factory. But to the best of your ability, slow down your upgrading. And I would also say you want to say no to the Internet of Things, which is machine-to-machine communication. So right now, you can buy diapers that have a chip in them that will send a message to your smartphone letting you know that your baby's diaper needs changing. you can, pretty much everything that can be connected to the internet will be connected. That's according to the last head of the FCC, Tom Wheeler. So like silverware will be connected. I don't know what it will do, but let you know that it needs cleaning. I have no idea. But the windshield of your car could let you know that there's a traffic jam up ahead and suggest a better route. That kind of stuff. You'll be able to download videos much more quickly. Those kinds of things are that's what the industry is promising we can expect from 5G and the Internet of Things. Now, I don't know that we really need that. I don't know what's possible, but if people say, you know what, I'm not going to buy into it, that could help. We can try. Since wireless technologies use at least 10 times as much energy as wired technologies, you want to focus on getting wired devices and do mobility. Consider mobility a luxury for emergency situations. The reason that wireless takes more is because of the radio transmitters. They take an incredible amount of power. One of the worst things you can do is to stream a video onto a mobile device. And that, let me see if I can explain that. So sending a text message uses less energy than having a voice conversation. And that uses less energy or it takes less data than sending a photo. Sending a photo uses less energy than sending a video. So you can see with each form, incrementally, that increases the amount of data that's consumed. If you've got more data, you're using more energy, and you're thereby emitting more CO2 in the process. So just keep that focused. Like if you're going to use Skype, just use it for voice. You don't have to include the video for the Skype call. One of my favorite suggestions, but it is by no means easy. Every family's going to take this differently. But we need to delay children's use of electronics until they have mastered reading, writing, and math on paper. So I know so many parents with the best of intentions who've been giving their children electronics since before they had speech, and finding that their children really take to this stuff. We need to, as much as possible, balance their use of electronics with time outside, in nature, on paper, with eye-to-eye contact. There are, I can recommend a couple of websites. One is zonein.ca. There's also an MD child psychiatrist, Victoria Dunkley. She has a wonderful book called Reset Your Child's Brain, where she lays out a program for giving your child a 3-week electronic fast. And children have sometimes cleared up autism and even psychotic behavior from doing this fast. And then she suggests how you can reintroduce electronics gradually. I think that's very worthwhile. Also interesting, in Shandong province in China, it's a very large province, 40% of their children now have myopia. And in November of 2018, they decided that children will not be allowed to bring cell phones to school, and no child will be allowed a computer session for longer than 15 minutes, and no longer than 15 minutes at a time, and no more than 1 hour total in a day. So there's another I think, worthwhile suggestion. Okay, and I'm mushing now the suggestions for reducing your EMR exposure and your footprint. In terms of children, that certainly would reduce their EMR exposure to delay their use of electronics, but it also impacts the footprint, because the sooner that children become users, the sooner they become users and consumers of the energy it takes to run this stuff. So we all need to pressure manufacturers to make modular, repairable electronics. If you have a volume purchase power, like if you're a business or a school district and you buy 10,000 laptops or something, you've got purchase power, and you can say, I'm only going to do this if there's a way to make sure that the device can be wired. I'm only going to buy this if it's repairable, so if the screen breaks, then we can replace it. That would be modular electronics, and we need to pressure manufacturers to build this kind of equipment. Web designers, very important. We need to minimize videos, pop-ups, slideshows. Those take lots of data. So we need to minimize them, and because they consume lots of energy and thereby emit lots of CO2. And we want to link or embed videos rather than repost them. So every time you repost, that's somebody else putting storage in the data center rather than linking to it.
Not having a phone is almost socially unacceptable. Almost would turn you into an outcast. And I say this only because I have 2 teenage boys, and I can't imagine, they would murder me if I took their phones away. Or is there anything specific you say to parents who want to fight the good fight, who want to decrease their family's footprint? Everything you're saying is making sense. And then there's the, quote, real world in terms of, is there anything specific that you would recommend to parents on how to go about trying to do that?
So just that you're asking the question, just that you're saying, okay, here's reality. I have teenagers in my life, and what is possible? That's the place to begin. And then I'm not interested in creating war, especially within a household. That's just not a constructive way to go about things. We can ask questions like, okay, if we can say, I've learned some things, I want to share it with you, and I'm interested in creating limits on my own use. Would you help me come up with limiting myself, with making limits myself? So there's this great quote from Bill Torbert, who's a retired professor of management from Boston University. And he says, if you're not aware that you are part of the problem, then you can't be part of the solution. So if you announce yourself as part of the problem and then say, I need help, can you help me? Oh, wow. I think that would be fantastic to get help for you, for your problem, from your teenagers. And then they'll do what they do, but you can ask them to help you with your problem.
There's clearly no great, easy solution to the question I asked you. And for a second there, I thought I was going to stump you. What a great answer. And I think that is a great starting point.
What I've found is that in all cases, none of us have a problem until we have a problem. Families with children with autism or ADD undoubtedly have an undeniable problem. And so in many cases, when they hear that protocol from the pediatrician, they'll say, or from the child psychiatrist with the electronic fast, they will also say, there is no way that we can go on a 3-week electronic fast. Forget it. And then Dr. Dunkley will say, okay, are you ready for another meltdown? And the parents say, no. So then they find a way to go for it. They're in an undeniable challenge. Not everyone has the privilege of an undeniable challenge. So if you're not there, you're not there. And it'll happen or it won't. But until we get there, my job is to focus on limiting myself and recognizing my own limits within my awareness. I can also say another question that's really interesting for me. There are about 3 billion people not yet online. And I believe in universal access. Like, I recognize that in order to have educational opportunities, work opportunities, even family connections right now, people need internet access. So who am I to say that those 3 billion people should not have access? I can't go there. And at the same time, I recognize that once they do get online, that exponentially increases engagement with the global superfactory. It massively increases consumption of electricity, water, conflict minerals, greenhouse gas emissions. All that stuff exponentially increases. So how do we reconcile that? Do those of us who have what I would call excessive use of media, are we going to decrease our consumption by like 70 or 80%, which is what climatologists have been recommending for decades, so that other people in the world can increase their consumption a little bit? Or do we say to those people, no, you can't have it? So I think that's another cool question to introduce to family members. And we're not going to have answers, but we can have the question. Our world now has more cell phones than toilets. I have trouble with that, with saying you can't have a toilet, but I can have more than one mobile device. But people may not even be aware that that's the dynamic going on. So we need a pretty massive campaign of real information. And the thing is that we've been giving the telecom industry billions and now trillions of dollars, and they can spread their gospel, which they do. We're going to have to be word of mouth without the trillions of dollars.
It seems to me that based on the telecommunications industry, several other industries, that on some levels, no matter how much I try to minimize my footprint or adjust my diet or, be the change that I want to see in the world, that although I'd like to think I have power with that, because of everything you're saying and then some, I feel powerless. And I wonder if you feel the same way, and if you'd sort of touch on that.
I have been extremely privileged to be in conversation with a lot of phenomenal engineers and scientists and physicians for the last 15 years or 20 years even, that I've been researching this. And they understand the rules. The first rule is that I am a kindergartner and they have to be patient with me. So I need a lot of repetition. And there are people that I call, sometimes on a daily basis, with my kindergarten questions. And one time I called Professor Gary Olheft. He has 2 degrees in electrical engineering. He's got a PhD in geophysics. He worked for NASA on the Apollo program starting when he was a teenager, many years ago. He taught at the Colorado School of Mines for 20 years. I can tell you a lot about him. But anyway, I called him and I said, I was really mad. And I said, I need a God bigger than AT&T. And he said, try Verizon. So That made me laugh, which is good. Laughing is good. But I have really struggled with that because, as I can see, in the day-to-day world, that God, AT&T and Verizon, is way, way more powerful than I am. And I struggle with seeing the power of nature and, other life-giving entities. I just, if you look at a child with a phone and try taking the phone away, we all recognize that we don't have very much power there. For me, it's constructive to recognize my powerlessness. Let's look at the legal question. You were asking about that earlier. I want to know now what is constructive use of my attention. And in Congress, there are now 2 bills that are worth talking about, where we want our congressmen, in one case, to vote no, in another case, to vote yes. So this is the start of 2019, and with this Congress, we want to tell our congresspeople to vote no on House Resolution 7236. That would prevent the telecom industry from having liability in the case of injury caused by radio frequency radiation emissions. So vote no on 7236. House Resolution 530 would make orders issued by the FCC that take away local authority over telecom facilities, like where they get placed. House Resolution 530 would make them have no force or effect. So tell your congresspeople to vote yes on House Resolution 530. And if a lot of people call, that would be really worthwhile. I struggle all the time with the question, what's constructive use of my attention? For me, the most nourishing thing is talking with other people who are also asking that question and recognizing real limits. So if I go to my city council and I talk about this, I've done it. So far, it has not been constructive. My city council is also bound by the Telecom Act. They don't want to be sued. And if it is believed that a municipality denies a permit, say, for a cellular antenna based on health or environmental concerns, then the telecom industry can sue that municipality. I don't know any municipality that can afford a lawsuit like that. There are municipalities that are creating ordinances that say we maintain local authority over our telecom facilities. It's going to be interesting in the next year or two to see how those hold up, because the orders from the FCC, which would be a federal regulation, are saying that those ordinances have no effect. We're in appeal right now with several of these cases, and we just have to watch and see. And meanwhile, I just think spreading the word is the most important thing we can do, giving room to our insanity and anger with these regulations, giving space for them, and then coming back and saying, okay, we need to be reasonable here and ask this question, what is constructive given the limitations of what's going on?
Do you see a positive outlook on any of this?
So when I hear the word positive, I also hear the word negative. I'm interested in wholeness. And so, like, there's light and there's dark. There's day and there's night. There's summer and winter, spring and fall. Like, I see the wholeness. I don't see, it doesn't work for me to only have light, to only have positivity. So I need I need a balance, and I'm not able to maintain positivity. I go to extremely despairing places with this information. And with seeing what has happened to people I love, people in my community, I see how communication has broken down so that people now just communicate by texting, and eye-to-eye contact doesn't happen so much anymore. Children don't really learn how to do conversation like we're having right now. I see that and so much more, as we all do. And what I'm interested in really is in, like, I just get so nourished by this kind of conversation where we're asking each other questions, where we're just saying, okay, can we define, what do you mean by a positive attitude? Another question for me is, well, what is health anyway? I mean, given what's going on now, if you want to be healthy, what can you go for realistically? Legally, what can you go for? Those kinds of questions. So if we have those kinds of conversations, I feel so blessed to be alive and nourished. And that's what I'm going for. And it doesn't mean that I won't end up crying for 3 weeks, and I'll get to the grocery store and people will say, hey, how are you? And I'll barely be able to talk. But that would be real. I mean, that is real when it does happen, and that happens, yeah.
If you can, tell us right now what the internet's main energy guzzlers are.
I see 4. The first, and they're not in any order of which is the main one, that's debatable. Access networks, that's the international array of cell towers, they're called masts in Europe, routers, that international setup. Those are called access networks that allow you to access the internet, and they take enormous amounts of energy. Number 2, data storage centers. So this is where your websites are stored, records of all kinds, educational records, bank records, medical records, military data. Anything that goes online, your smart meter, the smart meter is the utility meter on the side of your house, and if it's a transmitting meter, it's collecting data about your electricity use and sending that sometimes thousands of times per day to a collection site that then sends it to a cellular antenna, which then goes to the utility, which stores that data. Okay, in order to run data centers, which are just packed with computers, some of them are 11 million square feet large, you can see them from outer space, they need to keep cool so that those computers don't overheat. So they take a lot of air conditioning, and that requires water. You begin to see how data centers are actually, according to Greenpeace in 2012, if data centers were a country, they would rank 5th in consumption of energy. 3rd on the list, automated processes. So, like a lot of times you'll just be at your computer and your word processor will be upgraded without your permission or anything. That's an automated process. Backup storage for websites, that's an automatic process. Bots, those are automated processes. Those now are a major energy consumer. And the last thing is embodied energy. I I'm so excited to share this term with people and for all of us to start using this vocabulary. Embodied energy is the energy that goes into manufacturing every device. So in order to have any device, we need a lot of mining and refining and smelting and assembling, and all of that energy is embodied in the new device. The waste that's generated during manufacturing is embodied waste. The amount of energy that goes into manufacturing every device is way greater than the amount of energy that the device will use in its lifespan. The amount of waste generated during manufacturing is profoundly greater than what happens when we discard the item at the end of its usable life cycle. So we need this term, embodied energy, embodied waste.
So can you give us an example of embodied energy?
Okay. Let me tell a little about what goes into manufacturing silicon wafers, which are necessary for electronics and for solar panels, ironically. So you start with pure quartz gravel and pure charcoal. Typically that'll be petroleum coke from the tar sands. It can be from other places too. And then wood chips. You need a hard, moist wood that can come from the Amazon rainforest. Those three things, quartz, the pure carbon, and the wood, will need to be transported to a smelter. So there's transportation involved, there's energy involved, and CO2 emitted. At the smelter, the smelter is kept at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit 330 days per year. That takes an enormous amount of continuous energy. To date, only coal-fired power plants and nuclear power plants, I think you can get some geothermal power because it's continuous, but you cannot power a smelter with renewable energy because you need it 24/7, or you could blow up the factory, you could lose the silicon. So that's step one at that smelter, where you will get metallurgical grade silicon. It's 98% pure, not good enough for electronics or for solar panels. You can have 1 impurity part per billion for the silicon wafers in electronics. You can have 1 impurity part per million with solar panels. So you know, under the glass of a solar panel, there are all those little squares. Those are silicon wafers. And we're finding that the purer the silicon, the more efficient the solar panel. Okay, so after we get that metallurgical grade silicon, it is then shipped to a bell jar furnace that is kept at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for the year. And again, it's a continuous process. It goes through several other processes that are also energy intensive, and whenever you hear the word energy intensive, you're going to see greenhouse gas emissions. So I've just given you those are, let's say, 3 steps involved in the process, and that's just one part of the energy embodied in every computer and every solar panel.